Then on Sports Central, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the Penn State Nittany Lions, team that went 7-6 overall in the 2021 season. Kind of a tough season for Penn State. This is a very talented team last season, but they just took several close losses and ended up going 7-6. But how this team be in 2022? Is this team a potential Big Ten dark horse in the 2022 season? That's what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team, putting their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. Penn State 7-6 last season. Got off to a hot start. This team was 5-0 heading into that Iowa matchup on October 9th, and they were ranked very highly going into that matchup against the Hawkeyes. And turns out, Penn State, that was a challenging game for them because they lost Sean Clifford because he got injured, and from there on, Iowa ended up winning that game 20-23. But in the end, 7-6, kind of a disappointing record considering the amount of talent this team had. But Sean Clifford's coming back. This team definitely shows some big potential once again going into 2022. Beat Wisconsin in week 1, 16-10. That was a huge win in Madison in week 1. Wisconsin was they were expected to be very good in the 2021 season. And so, Wisconsin, that game, that was a huge win for Penn State going on the road in week 1. They beat Auburn 28-20. That was also a huge win. And once again, those losses against Iowa, lost them by 3, lost to Illinois by 2, lost to Michigan State by 3. Those are just 3 close losses, close, tough losses. That Illinois game, what was that, 9 overtimes? So, that was a pretty insane matchup there against the Illini. And, of course, Michigan State was very good last season. So, to go neck and neck with them that wasn't a terrible loss there. Lost to Arkansas, though, in their bowl game 10-24. So, only scored 10 points in that matchup. But Arkansas was a very good team last season. So 7-6 was the record for Penn State last year. Kind of disappointing, but heading into 2022, there is some optimism for this team. Sean Clifford's coming back for yet another season. Sean Clifford, he's got some experience. If you look at him, he's been the primary starter for 3 straight seasons since 2019. So this is going to be his 5th year with Penn State, 4th year starting. And Sean Clifford, he played overall fairly well last season, 3,100 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a 61% completion rate. So, it could have been better. He's not much of a dual threat quarterback, so the passing, obviously, he leans on heavily. And, he was decent at times. He was a bit inconsistent at times as well. But, in the end, yeah, it'll be good to have him back. I think the experience is going to be huge for this team going into next season. Kevon Lee's coming back as well, the top in the backfield, who put up just over 600 yards of offense and 2 touchdowns. But you do lose your second running back, Noah Kane. He has transferred away. He put up 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. So you do lose your second running back, but your top there in Kevon Lee's coming back, so that's really what matters. You lose Jahan Dotson, your top receiver. He's been a key impact player for Penn State over the past few seasons, and 2021 was his best season with Penn State. He put up 1,100 yards, 1,200 of total offense, and 13 touchdowns last season. So that's going to be obviously a challenging loss. But you do return Parker Washington, who put up nearly or over 800 yards and 4 touchdowns last season. And you also bring back Keandre Lambert-Smith, who put up over 500 yards of offense and 3 touchdowns. So you do bring back 2 of your top 3 in the receiving core, and you do lose your top there, but there is some good depth in the receiving core for the Nittany Lions, so I'm not too terribly concerned there. You lose 3 on the offensive line, 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 2 in the secondary. So defensively, you do lose multiple key starters, and the offensive line also is a bit of a questionable position, but I do feel like Penn State next season, Sean Clifford, if he can progress and have an excellent season, which he is very much able to, Penn State, this team does show a high ceiling going into next season. Kevon Lee as well. The running back for this team, he put up 600 yards last season. He shows some big potential as well. So I like Penn State. I feel like this is a team that is being slept on a bit. I understand the hype between Ohio State and Michigan going to next season. They're my likely top 2 teams in the Big Ten East as well. And Michigan State, of course, they were a big surprise team last season. So Penn State's kind of been hidden in there. But I feel like this team is not a team to sleep on going into next season. I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten. I'll just put that out there right now. I'd be very surprised if they did. But I feel like Penn State could definitely cause some noise in the Big Ten and potentially cause a couple of big upsets. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, you do lose a lot of players to the transfer portal. You do bring in Mitchell Tinsley. That's your one notable player coming in from the transfer portal from Western Kentucky. He was a receiver for them last season. But you lose Daniel George, receiver to Akron. You also lose Brevard, defensive lineman to Purdue. Enzo Jennings is in the transfer portal. Des Holmes, defensive lineman's off to Arizona State. A.J. Litton, defensive backs in the transfer portal. Same thing with Cam Sullivan, and also Anthony Wiggin. He's off to Akron. So, I mean, Penn State, you lose a lot of players to the transfer portal. Not many key players, but there are a couple in there that could make an impact. Recruiting-wise, this team, though, that is where this team shines going to next season. This team is 6th in the nation in recruiting, which is excellent. 2nd in the Big Ten. That is huge. You got 3 5-stars coming in, 13 4-stars. That's where a lot of optimism comes from for me with this Penn State team going to next season. Is you got a lot of young, excellent young talent coming in, and that's going to have a huge impact on the future. I mean, 6th in the nation is excellent. So that is certainly impressive. And considering, I mean, you got some decent experience coming into next season. You do lose a few key players. I mean, Jahan Dotson obviously is one of those key ones, but I mean, I do like the depth on this team. I feel like there's a lot of depth here, and even though you're losing a couple of key players, everyone loses a couple of key players. I don't care who you are. So, I mean, it's just a matter of who it is. And so for Penn State, I like this team. Like there's some potential here. So that being said, let's look at your schedule now going to next season. You got Purdue on the road to start off the season on a Thursday night. Now that is a game that that's pretty much a 50-50 game for me. Penn State, Purdue. I mean, you got Purdue at home. The Boilermakers were great last season. I mean, they had a really good 2021 season, and I mean, potentially they could be a Big Ten West contender in the 2022 season. I could see Purdue winning that West Division next season. I mean, the West Division could be won by 5 different teams. I mean, I honestly could see 5 different teams winning the division next season. Purdue is certainly probably one of the favorites for me. But, I mean, going on the road there on the Thursday night, you want to make sure that you're ready to go for that one because Purdue's going to they'll be a good team next season once again. And so, I mean, you got to be ready to go there. That's a huge one in week 1. Then you go to Ohio at home to start off your home schedule, and that's when your non-conference games there. And then you got Auburn on the road in week 3. So you got a pretty challenging September here. You got Purdue and Auburn both on the road. Then you got Central Michigan at home to end off your September. You got Northwestern at home, Michigan on the road after your bye. Then you got Minnesota at home, Ohio State at home. And then you got Indiana on the road, Maryland at home, Rutgers on the road, and then Michigan State at home to finish out the season. So your schedule's pretty tough. This is probably one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. You got Auburn as one of your non-conference games on the road. You got Purdue. I mean, your crossover games into the West Division are Northwestern, Purdue, and Minnesota. Northwestern, they're going to be, I wouldn't worry about them, but Purdue and Minnesota should both be pretty good going to next season. So, I mean, it's a pretty tough schedule. You got Ohio State at home, so you don't have to play them on the road at least. Michigan State's also a home game, but you do have to play Michigan in the Big House. But looking at September here, you got Purdue on the road. That is as close as it gets. I mean, that's probably one of the tougher games I've had to predict in this offseason, and that's going to be a tough one when I have to do a game preview for that. But I'm going to pick Purdue there right now. Purdue being at home in that matchup. I just think the Boilermakers, I mean, Thursday night as well, it's kind of a weird day to play a college football game, and it just so happens for Penn State they got to go on the road to start the season on a Thursday night, and it's against a tough team. Purdue, I'm going to take them. It's, once again, as close as it gets, and it's very tough to predict, but I'm going to pick Purdue there in a very close one right now. Ohio, easy win. Auburn on the road. I'm going to favor the Tigers there. That's also a very close one. Honestly, Penn State could easily go 4-0 through September, or they could also go 1-3 or 2-2 just as easily. I mean, Auburn, that's going to be a tough one on the road, and potentially they could be decent next season. So I'm going to favor them in that matchup in a close one. Central Michigan, easy win there. So you finish out your September with a 2-2 record, which isn't terrible. Honestly, I mean, your schedule starts off way tougher than it ends, and we'll get into that in a second. But October here, Northwestern, easy win, not expecting too much out of them. But Michigan on the road, tough place to play. The Wolverines should be one of the top teams in the Big Ten East. Once again, I'll favor the Wolverines there. Minnesota at home, that would be a huge win if you can come back the next week and get a win against them. Minnesota should be decent. I feel like I feel like you do. You beat Minnesota, and then the next week, got Ohio State coming to town. You're going to beat Ohio State as well. That's going to be the one loss that I'm predicting for Ohio State this upcoming season. So you get a massive win there against the Buckeyes. Ohio State, they're my favorite to win the Big Ten East, potentially make it to the college football playoff, and I've got Penn State beating them. Obviously, tough game to predict there, but I feel like Penn State at home, coming off of a huge Minnesota win, you ride that momentum and you get a win against Ohio State. And then looking at November, Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State, you go undefeated with them. You beat Indiana easily, Maryland in a closer one, Rutgers easily, and then Michigan State. That would be a huge win. You're going to get them in a close one as well. So 9-3 is my predicted record for Penn State. I've got this team. I think 9-3 is a very reasonable record. I'm pretty confident that a 9-3 season is going to happen. Potentially, I mean, you get up to 10 wins as well. But, I mean, I think Penn State, this is a good team. Definitely being slept on a bit. You don't want to sleep on Penn State going into next season because I feel like this team has got potential to be kind of in the background, and they sneak up and get a couple of huge unexpected wins. And that Ohio State one is a for sure example of that. But that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Penn State, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.